Hi, and welcome to the second installment of our notes on biomes. Let's start out by talking about chaparral, which is, I will say, one of my favorite biomes, 'cause it's just cool. Look at this dog. It's so happy right there in the chaparral. Chaparral is very limited in its extent. It really doesn't exist in very many places, mostly around the Mediterranean Sea, which you know is between Europe and Africa, in Central California, in Australia, a little bit in South Africa, a little bit in South America, but only in small areas. It's the soil is kind of rocky. It's not very fertile. There aren't very big trees. It's good for things like say olive trees that are kind of gnarled and can handle a lot of wind and kind of tough conditions. It's got hot and dry summers. It's got mild, wet winters. So it's not a bad place to go on vacation. But again, trees don't really like it, and so you get a lot of scrubs. Next, savannas. These places are tropical grasslands. There are multiple types of grasslands we'll talk about, and as you can tell, a grassland is just a place where grass is kind of the dominant form of vegetation. The word tropical, as you probably know, means near the equator, and so savannas are they're grasslands near the equator, especially in Africa. Africa has the largest area of savanna, and there are a lot of very cool animals. Like these little guys. It kind of has a weird set of seasons because it's near the equator. It doesn't have seasons the way we really think of them, in the sense of there being a winter when it's really cool and a summer when it's really hot. Its seasons are more dominated by the presence or absence of rain. So there's a wet season, when there's a lot of rain, the grasses grow really tall. A drier season when grasses turn brown and die off, and then I guess if you could call kind of a natural disaster, but it's not really a disaster. It's kind of a phenomenon because the savanna needs this to stay fertile. A fire season when the old grasses burn off, and hopefully, if you're a bunch of little animals, you manage to run away from the fire and not get burned up with it. But if you are burned up with it, then you add to the fertility of the savanna, so more plants can grow there. So that's an ecosystem for you. Everything is connected. As mentioned kind of on the last slide, there are a large number of big, impressive animals, especially on the African savanna. But because there's not a dense forest or anything there, there's going to be less diversity than you see in places like, say, rainforests. Another biome is called grassland, which you're probably pretty familiar with. In North America, on the Great Plains, we have the prairie, which is another area where grass dominates. The soil here is very deep. It's very fertile. It's great for farmland, which is why Kansas, Nebraska grow huge amounts of corn and wheat and soy and so on. It's good for grazing of animals and it's a temperate grassland, and temperate is a word to define kind of in opposition to tropical. If tropical means near the equator, temperate means not so much near the equator, kind of in the middle. There are not too many trees in a prairie type grassland, and depending on how much rain it gets, which could depend on, say, how close it is to an ocean, it can get the grass can be taller or shorter. The steppe. The steppe is kind of a grassland, but a lot of times we talk of it as a separate biome. It's generally grassy. It's semi-arid, which you take that apart. Semi meaning half, arid meaning dry. So call it halfway to being a desert. It's a fairly dry area compared to other places around it. Steppes are usually far from the ocean, which is one thing that makes them dry in the first place. They're not humid. There's no water evaporating in the ocean and then blowing over the steppe and raining on it. The world's largest steppe, and what most people think of when you say the word the steppe, it stretches across southern Russia. It's this, thank you, map. You've made this nice and kind of reddish for us. It's this area. Great for riding horses on if you're, say, the Mongol hordes and you're starting out here and you just thunder on down the steppe, just raiding villages and destroying things as you go. The desert. Now, don't misspell this. Remember, 2 is better than 1, and dessert, that, a piece of pie with whipped cream on top, is better than the desert, where you crawl through the sand and then you die of exposure and, lack of water. So the desert only has 1 S. Again, 2 is better than 1. 1 S is bad. So the desert is bad, but not really. Desert's really okay. Rain, true, doesn't fall there very often. That's kind of what defines deserts. But that doesn't mean they're devoid of life. There are a lot of species that have adapted over the years to really, really dry conditions. I'm going to really quickly draw a little lizard there. Is that what a lizard looks like? Maybe not. So let's go to the next one. These deserts are usually hot, but they don't have to be. Some deserts actually get snow. What defines a desert is not temperature necessarily, but precipitation. So you could have an incredibly cold place that's technically a desert because it just doesn't get much rain or moisture. The thing about deserts, though, the temperature does vary widely from day to night. There isn't very much water, there's not much vegetation to moderate your temperature changes. Oops, shouldn't have that S in there. If you ever actually go out into a desert like this, a nice sandy desert, on your little motorized vehicle, whatever those things are called, bring a blanket with you if you're going to stay the night, because it gets really, really cold in a desert at night. There's nothing that can hold in the heat. Unlike, say, in a city where, as you know, the asphalt and the concrete kind of absorb heat and let it off slowly over the course of the evening, which is one reason, as we talked about, that cities stay warmer. The tundra. The tundra is near the north or south poles, so it's a polar climate, and the lack of direct sunlight makes it really, really cold. It's not always really, really cold. That is, say in the summer when that part of the world is kind of pointed more towards the sun and it is getting direct sunlight, maybe for 24 hours a day. It can get, no longer bone-chillingly cold. But at the same time, in general, the climate in the tundra is really, really cold. It's so cold that a lot of the soil stays frozen completely solid all the way through. And this is the soil we call permafrost, which makes sense. You break it down, permanent, frost, so permanently frosted. So trees can't grow, trees can't send their roots down through this permafrost. So there aren't generally trees in the tundra. There aren't even much in the way of bushes because, bushes often, have decent root systems themselves. Here there are really only very specialized plants and animals who have adapted to life here. It's a very harsh environment, and there isn't a lot of room for leeway. You have to be so specialized for the environment that if something changes, you're kind of out of luck. That's one problem that these poor little polar bears are going through, as it looks like they're going to have less and less polar ice around the North Pole. We'll see what happens to them. Some people say they'll be kind of replaced eventually by other types of bears or other large predators, but the future doesn't look too good for the polar bear because, once again, everything in the ecosystem is kind of interconnected. The poles are not the only place that you have biomes like this. A lot of people talk about, say, a highland biome that basically parallels the tundra, the polar biome. So really, really high up on mountains, you basically have similar types of ecosystem. It's very, very cold, and only particular types of plants and animals are adapted to live there. Good job. That is the end of our biome lecture. So see you in class.